The diplomatic vessel Reasonable Discourse was anything but reasonable, and discourse was the last thing on Ambassador Vrextal's mind as the ship decelerated toward the blue-green orb that had become the Concordat's most pressing problem. "Primitive weapons signatures detected," announced Security Chief Maz Durok, his forearms simultaneously adjusting different monitoring stations. The crystalline growths on his exoskeleton caught the light as he moved, sending prismatic reflections across the command deck. "Nothing that could reach us at this altitude." "How reassuring," Vrexel replied, voice dry as vacuum. "Perhaps we should send them a certificate for trying." Cultural analyst Pelior floated closer to the view screen, her translucent body pulsing with biochemical signals that conveyed both excitement and apprehension. "Remember, these creatures survived the assessment. Only 14 species in recorded history have done so. 13 of those species had the sense to be grateful," Vrextal counted, adjusting his ceremonial collar. The garment, woven from the conductive fibers of a star-dwelling organism, sparkled with artificial intelligence nodes programmed to read the emotional states of inferior beings. Not that he needed technological assistance to read humans. Their emotional states practically leaked from their pores. These humans demanded reparations. Mazdurok made a sound like grinding stones. Among his people, this passed for laughter. "They don't understand galactic politics. The assessment determines which species deserve a seat at the table. The fact that it kills 98% of tested civilizations is merely efficient." Helena's membrane rippled with disapproval. "You're both missing something fundamental. Look at their historical records." A holographic display materialized between them, showing a montage of human behaviors that defied conventional xenopsychological models. Humans jumping from orbital platforms with nothing but fabric to slow their descent. Humans deliberately ingesting neurotoxins for recreational purposes. Humans willingly entering environments that would liquefy the respiratory organs of any sensible species. "What am I seeing, analyst?" Vrextal asked, mandibles clicking in annoyance. "Pattern-blacking behavior," Peliola replied. "Every other species optimizes for survival. Humans optimize for something else." "Stupidity," suggested Mazdurak. "Experience," Pelior corrected. "They deliberately seek out situations that could kill them, and somehow this has made them extraordinarily difficult to kill accidentally." The ship's AI interrupted, with a tone that somehow managed to sound both deferential and annoyed. "Ambassador, the humans have designated a landing zone. They've sent coordinates to a facility in a region called Nevada." Rexpal flicked a dismissive appendage. "Very well. Set us down and prepare the negotiation packages. The standard terms should suffice. Resource extraction rights in exchange for limited technology transfers and provisional membership." "With all respect, Ambassador," Paleo ventured, "perhaps standard terms are inadequate for non-standard species." "Your concerns are noted and irrelevant," Rexal replied. "The Concordat has incorporated thousands of species over 12 millennia. We hardly need to reinvent our approach for a group of bipeds who only recently discovered how atoms work." The Reasonable Discourse descended through Earth's atmosphere with the casual arrogance of a species that had mastered gravitational manipulation before humans had invented the wheel. The ship left no contrail, produced no sonic boom, and remained invisible to all but the most sophisticated human tracking systems, which, unknown to the Concordat delegation, were considerably more sophisticated than they had been led to believe. The Nevada facility appeared underwhelming from the air, a collection of angular structures arranged in concentric circles with a central landing pad large enough to accommodate their vessel. No weapons emplacements were visible, no crowds had gathered to witness this historic moment. Just 3 human figures waiting beside a ground vehicle. "Curious," Mazdarok observed, running a threat assessment. "I expected more pageantry. Most species send their highest leaders and half their population to gawk when we arrive. Perhaps they don't understand the honor we bestow, Vrextal suggested, already mentally composing the patronizing opening remarks he would deliver. Pelinor's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a frequency associated with deep thought. Or perhaps they understand more than we give them credit for. The ship settled onto the landing pad with precision that would have impressed any species except the one currently hosting them. The outer hull reconfigured itself, creating an egress point calibrated to Earth's atmospheric pressure and gravitational constants. Ambassador Vrextal adjusted his translator implant and strode toward the exit, flanked by his security chief and cultural analyst. "Remember protocol," he instructed. "No concessions without authorization. The standard terms are non-negotiable." The delegation emerged into Earth's sunlight, which struck Vrextal as unnecessarily bright and spectrally imbalanced. The air contained moisture levels that made his respiratory membranes uncomfortably damp. Everything about this planet seemed designed to irritate sophisticated life forms. The human delegation approached. Two wore uniforms indicating military function, walking slightly behind a central figure dressed in what appeared to be intentionally subdued attire, a simple dark suit that offered no indication of rank or importance. "Welcome to Earth," the central human said, voice modulated in what xenolinguistic database is identified as a neutral tone. "I'm Director Harlow, appointed by the United Earth government to conduct these negotiations." Vrextal performed the Concordat's formal greeting gesture, a complex movement of upper limbs meant to impress lesser species with the coordination it required. "I am Ambassador Vrextal of the Concordat of Aligned Worlds, accompanied by Security Chief Mazdarak and Cultural Analyst Pelior. We come bearing the opportunity for your species to join the most advanced alliance in the known galaxy." Director Harlow's face performed a movement that involved exposing teeth, a gesture the briefing materials identified as a smile, though it bore uncomfortable resemblance to threat displays among certain carnivorous species. "That's quite an offer," Harlow replied, making no attempt to reciprocate the elaborate greeting. "We look forward to discussing terms. Our facility is this way." As they walked toward the central building, Pelio drifted closer to the human, her translucent form undulating with curiosity. "Director Harlow, I've studied your species extensively. I'm particularly interested in your response to the assessment. Most species that survive it experience collective psychological trauma." Harlow's expression remained unchanged. "We're resilient." "Resilient?" Mazdarok repeated, the universal translator struggling to convey his skepticism. "Your cities burned, your oceans boiled, your atmosphere was temporarily rendered unbreathable." "Tuesday," Harlow replied with a shrug. "We've done worse to ourselves." Vrextal's communicator vibrated against his primary sensory node, indicating an incoming message from the Concordat High Command. He would review it after the initial meeting. Probably just the usual bureaucratic reminders about keeping technology transfers to the absolute minimum necessary to extract this planet's resources. They entered the facility through doors that slid open with a hydraulic hiss that struck Vrextal as quaintly mechanical. The interior, however, was unexpectedly sophisticated. Clean lines, recessed lighting, and subtle displays embedded in surfaces that appeared to be simple stone. "Our negotiation chamber is prepared," Harlow announced, gesturing toward an open doorway. "We've adjusted the environmental controls to match the specifications your advanced team provided." "How accommodating," Vrextal responded, mandibles flexing in what his species considered a magnanimous expression. "Perhaps this indicates your willingness to accommodate our terms as well." "That remains to be seen, Ambassador," Harlow responded, that unsettling smile returning. We're quite interested in hearing exactly what the Concordat has to offer, a species that survived what wasn't supposed to be survivable. As they entered the negotiation chamber, Mazdurok security implants registered something unusual. A faint energy signature emanating from beneath the facility, operating at frequencies typically associated with Concordat deep space communications technology, which was, of course, impossible, unless... The security chief filed the anomaly for later investigation. After all, what could these primitives possibly know about technologies they'd never been shown? The doors sealed behind them with a sound that, to experienced galactic travelers, might have seemed less like security and more like the closing of a trap. The negotiation chamber resembled a museum exhibit dedicated to minimalism. A circular table, surrounded by chairs designed with just enough understanding of xenophysiology to be almost comfortable for all parties involved. Environmental baffles hummed at frequencies calculated to sound reassuring to various nervous systems. Director Harlow took a seat without ceremony. "Shall we skip the customary exchange of meaningless pleasantries? Your assessment killed 37 million humans. We'd prefer to move directly to substantive matters." Ambassador Vrexthal's expression shifted into what his neural net advisors had described as appropriately somber yet authoritative. The effect was somewhat undermined by the fact that his species' facial structure made any attempted expression look like a digestive disorder. "The loss of life is regrettable but necessary for the greater cosmic order," Vrexthal stated, placing a crystalline data module on the table. It expanded into a holographic display showing resource extraction projections, technology transfer schedules, and provisional membership timelines. "The Concordat offers these standard terms." "Unacceptable," Harlow interrupted, not even glancing at the display. Mazdurok's armored exoskeleton clicked as he shifted forward. "Perhaps you misunderstand. These are not suggestions. These are the terms by which your species may join the most advanced." "We understood perfectly the first time," Harlow replied, voice containing the practiced patience of someone explaining basic arithmetic to a particularly dense fungus. "Your terms amount to legalized planetary strip mining in exchange for outdated technology we've already reverse-engineered from the wreckage of your assessment ships." A moment of silence fell over the chamber, broken only by the soft ping of Pelinor's biochemical systems recalibrating in surprise. "That's absurd," Vrexthal finally managed. "The assessment probes self-destruct upon mission completion. There would be nothing to recover." Harlow reached into a pocket and placed a small device on the table. It was unmistakably a Concordat quantum positioning unit. A technology the standard terms wouldn't have shared with humans for at least 40 cycles. "Your self-destruct protocols need work," Harlow noted, "much like your negotiation strategy." 3 days prior, in a secure chamber orbiting Concordat Central World 7, High Commander Zithbax had convened an emergency session of the Strategic Response Division. The holographic attendees represented the 12 founding species of the Ancient Alliance. "The humans create complications," Zithbax had stated, manipulating a display showing Earth's defense capabilities. "Unlike previous assessment survivors, they've refused initial contact protocols and demanded direct negotiation." Councillor Remvas, whose gaseous form swirled with agitation, responded, "Why waste resources on diplomacy? The assessment is merely our first filter. If they prove troublesome, implement containment protocol." "Preliminary analysis suggests containment would fail," responded Admiral Ticknor, genetically related to Pelinor but lacking her curiosity about lesser species. Their recovery speed from the assessment was unprecedented. 63% of damaged infrastructure rebuilt within one local solar cycle. "Then we must bargain in apparent good faith," Zithbax had concluded. Ambassador Rextal will present standard terms. When rejected, he will gradually concede points according to the negotiation matrix, culminating in acceptance of what appears to be unfavorable terms, but preserves our essential extraction rights. Back in the Nevada facility, Rextal was discovering that the carefully calculated negotiation matrix was about as useful as a pressure suit made of tissue paper. Perhaps we should reframe our discussion, he attempted, mandibles clicking nervously. The Concordat values Earth's unique biosphere and cultural heritage. No, you don't, Harlow countered bluntly. You value our resources and are mildly concerned about our survival capability. Let me present our terms instead. A different holographic display replaced the Concordat proposal. This one showed human ships, designs unfamiliar to the aliens, and territorial boundaries that extended well beyond Earth's solar system. We require recognition as a sovereign expansion-capable civilization with these designated development zones, Harlow explained, highlighting vast swaths of space the Concordat had designated for future mining operations. We'll also need unrestricted access to Concordat technology databases as reparations for the assessment. Mazdurok made a sound like shattering glass, the equivalent of a shocked gasp. You can't possibly expect... Additionally, Harlow continued as if the security chief hadn't spoken, we want the truth about the precursor artifacts found in our Kuiper belt. Pelinor's translucent form suddenly darkened, a physiological reaction she couldn't control. What artifacts? She asked, her voice higher than normal. The ones your scout ships recovered 7 local years ago, Harlow replied. The ones mentioned nowhere in your records, but discussed in encrypted transmissions we intercepted and decoded. Rextal's secondary hearts began a stress rhythm. This meeting had spiraled beyond worst-case scenarios into previously unimagined catastrophe. These humans weren't just surviving, they were comprehending. Worse, they were anticipating. Director Harlow, he began, switching to emergency diplomatic protocols. There seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding. The Concordat approaches all species with benevolence. The Concordat approaches all species as resources to be harvested, Harlow corrected. You expected groveling gratitude for allowing us to survive your test. Instead, you found a species that doesn't respond to existential threats with submission. A perplexing sensation crept through Vrextal's neural pathways, one the ambassador hadn't experienced in 300 cycles of diplomatic service. It took several moments to identify. Genuine uncertainty. Pelinor drifted closer to Harlow, fascination overriding protocol. How did you know about the Kuiper objects? That operation was conducted with total communications blackout? The human's expression remained unchanged, but something shifted in the air between them. We've been watching the Watchers for quite some time, analyst. Your species isn't the first to visit Earth. A notification chimed on Mazdurok's tactical display, drawing his attention away from the deteriorating notice and negotiation. The security chief's posture stiffened as he processed the incoming data. Ambassador, he said quietly, we have a situation. The reasonable discourse has detected anomalous energy signatures throughout Earth's orbital defense grid. Something is interfacing with our systems. Vrixtal maintained his diplomatic composure through sheer force of will. Perhaps we should recess briefly to consider your counter-proposal. Oh, of course, Harlow agreed with suspicious promptness. Our facility is at your disposal. The eastern wing contains appropriate accommodations for your physiological needs. As the 3 Concordat representatives exited the chamber, Mazdurok activated a frequency scrambler to shield their conversation from potential surveillance. Ambassador, the ship reports critical system compromise. External communications are offline. the crew detected a targeted data extraction event before defensive measures engaged. Impossible, Vrextel hissed. Their technology is nowhere near capable of penetrating our security. Evidently, Pelial observed dryly, our intelligence regarding their capabilities requires significant revision. The corridor lights dimmed momentarily before restoring to full brightness. An unnatural silence fell over the facility. The background hum of environmental systems, the subtle vibrations of a planet teeming with life, all ceased simultaneously. A new sound replaced them, emergency alert tones emanating from every communication device the delegation carried. "Warning," announced the reasonable discourse's artificial intelligence, its usually smooth voice fragmented with static. "Orbital fleet compromised. Unauthorized access detected in primary and secondary command networks. Emergency protocols initiated. Crew evacuated to stasis, awaiting authorized command override." The message repeated once before cutting off abruptly. Mazdurok's weapon materialized in 2 of his 4 hands. "We need to return to the ship immediately." "Agreed," Vrextel replied, attempting to contact the vessel. Only silence answered. Pelinor's bioluminescent patterns shifted to warning configurations. "The humans knew who we were before we arrived. They knew what we wanted. They knew about classified operations beyond their system. And now, somehow, they've neutralized our only means of departure." The delegation froze as a facility-wide announcement system activated. "Attention, Concordat representatives!" Director Harlow's voice echoed through the corridors, the earlier diplomatic tone replaced with something colder and more precise. "This facility is now under security lockdown due to a Level 1 containment breach. Please remain where you are. A security team will escort you to a designated safety area." The floor beneath them trembled slightly. In the distance, heavy mechanisms engaged with the unmistakable sound of barriers deploying and locks engaging. "They're not negotiating," Pellinot whispered, her translucent form pulsing with rapid calculations. "They never were." "No," Vrextal agreed, 11,000 years of concordate superiority crumbling in his mind like ancient pottery. "They're hunting." Concordat diplomatic training included no protocols for fleeing in undignified panic. Yet Ambassador Vrextal found himself doing exactly that, as emergency klaxons wailed throughout the Nevada facility. The trio of aliens moved with practiced coordination born from millennia of evolutionary and cultural superiority. "The ventilation system," Mazdurek suggested, targeting a maintenance access point with a device that reconfigured matter at the molecular level. The security chief had smuggled the tool past human scanners by storing it in a dimensional pocket, technically illegal in 16 galactic sectors. The access panel dissolved. Pellinor slipped through first, her amorphous form compressing to navigate the narrow space. Vrextal followed with considerably less grace, his ceremonial garments catching on protruding elements of human engineering. "Undignified," the ambassador muttered as Mazdurok sealed the entrance behind them. "The High Council will hear about this barbaric treatment." "The High Council," Mazdurok observed while checking a positional tracker, "may never hear from us again if we don't reach the ship." They navigated through dust-held passages designed for maintenance drones rather than sentient beings. Vrextal's environmental filter struggled against the primitive particulates, while Pelior's translucent body began absorbing trace elements involuntarily, causing her to fluoresce in shades of purple not normally part of her emotional spectrum. "Spatial anomaly ahead," she warned, her sensory membranes detecting what the others could not. "The humans have deployed quantum displacement fields." "Impossible!" Vrextal wheezed through his overtaxed filter. "That technology requires computational capacity beyond their..." He stopped talking as they emerged into a cavernous underground chamber that definitively ended any debates about human technological capacity. The space stretched beyond conventional architectural proportions, filled with equipment that shouldn't exist on Earth. Artifacts from a dozen worlds hung suspended in analysis fields, concordat encryption matrices displayed in holographic form, partially decoded. A disassembled assessment probe, the supposedly self-destructed kind, occupied a central platform. Most disturbing of all, a perfect replica of the reasonable discourse, scaled down but accurate to the molecule, floated in a containment field. "They've been studying us," Pellinor whispered, her voice modulating with newfound respect. "For decades, judging by the progression of analysis." Maz Durok's tactical array cycled through potential responses before settling on the obvious: "We need to destroy this facility." "What?" Rextol demanded. "Our ship is compromised, our weapons inadequate for this scale, and apparently our technological advantage was fictional." A new voice entered the conversation. Not Harlow's, but equally human. Not fictional, just chronologically misaligned. The aliens turned to find a human female leaning against a support column. Unlike the formal attire of the negotiation team, she wore simple clothing marked with symbols Pellinor recognized as scientific notations. "Chief Researcher Quan," she introduced herself with the casual confidence of someone who knew exactly how many ways she could end the conversation permanently. "Welcome to Project Looking Glass." Mazdurok raised his weapon. The human made no move to defend herself. "I wouldn't," she advised. "That quantum disruptor was manufactured in our facilities. Firing it here would trigger countermeasures designed specifically for concordat weapons." "You're bluffing," the security chief replied, though his trigger appendage remained conspicuously still. Quan pushed away from the column and approached a nearby console. Data streams shifted around her fingers as she manipulated information with practiced ease. "The Concordat has encountered approximately 27,000 distinct civilizations since its formation. You've assessed 8,000 of those. 117 survived. 14 thrived." She looked up. "The math suggested we weren't the first to face your tests." Pelliore drifted closer, analytical curiosity overriding caution. "You couldn't possibly know those figures. They're contained in the restricted archives on Central World 3. "We had help," Quan replied with a minimal shrug. "From whom?" Vrextal demanded, 11,000 years of diplomatic experience failing to keep the incredulity from his voice. The answer came as the lights in the chamber reconfigured to display a familiar symbol, one that hadn't been seen in the galaxy for over 5 millennia. "The Ascended Combine," Mazdurok breathed, all 4 hands dropping to his sides in shock. "Defunct for thousands of cycles," Vrextal protested weakly. "Dissolved after the Sundering Wars." "Officially," Quan agreed. "Unofficially, they've been watching the Concordat's expansion with growing concern. Your assessment program caught their attention when it targeted potential allies." The implications cascaded through Vrextal's consciousness like a gravitational collapse. The Combine had been the Concordat's only true rival in the early days, a loose alliance of transcendent species who advocated for evolutionary freedom rather than controlled development. Their disappearance had been celebrated as vindication of Concordat philosophy. If they still existed, Pellinor's analytical mind raced ahead to the logical conclusion. "You're saying the Combine protected Earth? Guided your development?" "Not exactly," Quan replied, manipulating the display to show historical data. "They found us after we survived your assessment independently. They were surprised. Apparently, most species don't respond to near extinction by immediately planning counterattacks." Mazdurok made a sound his species used to indicate profound disbelief. "You survived by chance, then? Cosmic fortune." We survived because humanity's defining characteristic isn't intelligence or technology, Quan corrected. It's spite. Your assessment killed 37 million of us. Some species would surrender after such losses, some would collapse. We started building bigger guns. A proximity alert from Mazdarok's tactical array interrupted the conversation. Human security forces were converging on their location from multiple access points. "They've found us," the security chief announced unnecessarily. "They always knew where you were," Quan replied, sounding almost sympathetic. "This facility has quantum entanglement tracking embedded in the molecular structure of the air. Every breath you take tags you more precisely." Vrextal's diplomatic mind calculated rapidly diminishing options. What happens now? Imprisonment? Dissection? Retribution? "That depends," said a now familiar voice as Director Harlow entered from a previously invisible doorway, "on whether you choose to be part of the solution or remain part of the problem." The director approached, flanked by security personnel carrying weapons that hummed with technologies no human should possess. "The Concordat's assessment program has eliminated thousands of species that might have enriched the galactic community," Harlow stated. "Your leadership has maintained power through technological suppression masked as benevolent guidance. That ends now." Pelinor's analytical mind processed the changing paradigm faster than her companions. "You're not just defending your world, you're planning to challenge the entire Concordat." "Not alone," Harlow replied. "The surviving assessment species have formed a counter-alliance with Combine assistance. Earth is merely the newest member, and according to our allies, potentially the most troublesome." "Because you're insane," Mazdarak offered helpfully. "Because we're angry," Harlow corrected. "And because, unlike most species, we have a particular talent for making our problems into someone else's problems." Warning signals suddenly blared from every communication device, drowning out whatever threat or offer might have followed. The chamber's displays flickered, security personnel raised weapons, and, for a brief moment, chaos reigned. When the cacophony resolved into comprehensible data, the message was simple and devastating. The reasonable discourse had broken containment and was preparing for emergency departure protocols. With, or without, its diplomatic team. Survival instincts older than civilization propelled the three aliens toward the nearest exit. They would contemplate the collapse of 11 millennia of galactic order after securing transportation off this suddenly very dangerous planet. Behind them, Harlow spoke into a communication device with frustrating calmness. "The package is moving. Activate the contingency." The Nevada desert at night burned cold enough to crystallize the moisture in Vrextal's respiratory membranes. The ambassador and his companions had escaped the underground complex through an emergency evacuation shaft, convenient for humans, decidedly less so for beings with exoskeletons, multiple limbs, or gelatinous physiologies. "The ship is 7 kilometers northeast," Mazdarok announced, consulting his tactical array. The device flickered unpredictably, affected by whatever countermeasures the humans had deployed. "If we maintain maximum speed, we might reach it before—" A thunderous boom interrupted the security chief as the reasonable discourse broke atmosphere overhead, its propulsion systems creating a momentary artificial dawn. The vessel climbed with desperate acceleration, executing evasive maneuvers against weapons that shouldn't exist in human hands. But before that, Pelion finished for him, her translucent form rippling with complex emotions beyond the capacity of their universal translators. Brextel watched their only means of escape dwindling into the night sky. 11,000 years of Concordat supremacy, undone by a species that still uses combustion engines and thinks decorating their bodies with pigments is the height of self-expression. They've been playing a different game entirely, Pellinot observed, analytical, even in crisis. While we evaluated them against our standards, they were creating their own. A dust cloud approached from the direction of the facility, ground vehicles moving with precision toward their position. The humans had tracked them, of course. Quantum entanglement in the air, indeed. "What now, Ambassador?" Mazdarok asked, his weapons system cycling through increasingly desperate options. "Surrender to primitives or die with dignity?" Before Vrexthal could formulate an appropriately pompous response, reality distorted around them. The desert, the approaching humans, even the sky above, all wavered like reflections in disturbed water. Spatial displacement field, Pelianor identified, her scientist's fascination momentarily overriding survival concerns. But the energy requirements would. Light enveloped them. Not the harsh glare of weapons fire, but the gentle luminescence of advanced transportation technology. When vision returned, the three Concordat representatives found themselves in a chamber of unmistakable design. Curved walls of living material, atmospheric composition perfectly balanced for a dozen different species, gravity adjusted to universal comfort standards. "Cormine architecture," Brexjal whispered, mandibles slack with shock. A figure approached. Neither human nor any species recorded in Concordat archives. Its form shifted between states of matter with fluid grace, simultaneously substantial and ethereal. "Ambassador Vrextol," the being acknowledged, its voice bypassing conventional sound to manifest directly in their consciousness. "I am Observer 7th Perspective, representing the Ascended Combine Oversight Council." Mazdurok's tactical systems went completely offline in the being's presence. Pellinor's bioluminescence shifted to frequencies associated with profound reverence. "The Combine truly survived," Vrextal managed. 11 millennia of diplomacy providing no protocol for this situation. "We never left," 7th Perspective responded. "We simply stepped back to observe the Concordat's evolutionary path. Until recently, intervention seemed unnecessary. The humans changed that calculation," Pellinose deduced. The entity's form pulsed with confirmation. "Humanity represents a unique developmental branch, a species that advances through cooperation despite individualistic tendencies, that grows stronger through adversity rather than being culled by it. When your assessment targeted them, we recognized a crossroads for galactic civilization. You could have revealed yourselves earlier," Brexhal pointed out, diplomatic training reasserting itself, prevented countless assessment casualties, and perpetuated the Concordat's fundamental misconception that advanced species must control the development of others, 7th Perspective countered. "Some lessons require demonstration rather than instruction." Through a view portal that materialized in the chamber wall, they watched as human vessels intercepted the fleeing reasonable discourse. The ship submitted without resistance, its systems likely as compromised as the diplomats had been. "What happens now?" Vrextel asked, dignified even in defeat. "Now," 7th Perspective replied, "you return to Central World with knowledge that will fundamentally reshape the Concordat. The age of assessment is ending, the age of collaboration begins, with humanity as a full participant. They'll never accept subordinate status," Mazdarok predicted grimly. "Ath," observed 7th Perspective with what might have been amusement, "is precisely the point. The Concordat forgot that true strength emerges from diversity of approach, not conformity of development." The chamber hummed as transportation energies gathered around the three aliens. "Tell your leaders," the Combine representative instructed as their forms began to shimmer, "that the species you tried to test has become the new standard, and unlike the Concordat, humans don't believe in pass-fail assessments, they believe in second chances." As transportation energies enveloped them, Vrextal experienced an emotion unprecedented in his 3-century diplomatic career: anticipation. The Concordat would adapt or collapse in the face of this new reality. Somewhere in Nevada, Director Harlow was probably smiling that disturbing, teeth-baring smile, satisfied that the next species to arrive at Earth would approach with appropriate caution, and perhaps a touch of that uniquely human emotion, respect, tinged with healthy fear. The universe, it seemed, had new management.